there should be something very specific that happens when you fully integrated Emunah, and that is not only having Emunah in Hashem, but having Emunah in yourself. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This is going to be the final consequence of Emunah, is that if you're doing it right, the Sfarim speak about how there has to be an Emunas Atzma, Emunas Atzmo, an Emunah in oneself, faith in yourself. And if you don't have that, then something got lost in translation during this whole semester, because as we're going to see, believing in yourself is a fundamental property of a believing in Hashem. So let's explore. Okay, we've got some source sheets here, and we've got some source sheets over here.
Do you guys need any extras? Do you want the extras? Do you want the extras?
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, otherwise it'll just
There's one extra.
take up space in the base medrash.
Here. Oh, no, that's my sheet.
Okay, so the first source is Rav Tzadok. I believe we've looked at Rav Tzadok before, possibly. Rav Tzadok of Lublin, who lived at the end of the 19th century in Europe, a student, originally a Litvak, who became not a Litvak, I guess, because he was from Poland, but who was a misnagid, I guess you could say, who was not Hasidish, and then was so taken with the Ishbitzer Rav that he became a close Chassid, and then took over for the Ishbitzer when he died. And Rav Tzadok, I mean, personally, one of the most original thinkers in the last couple hundred years, like just unbelievable human being in his thinking, and so in no uncertain terms, Rav Tzadok says, just as a person has to have Emunah in Hashem, so too he must afterwards have Emunah in himself. That's it. Very simple. Kashem shetzarich adam laha'amin ba'Hashem yizbrach, kach tzarich achakach laha'amin ba'atzmo. So let's figure out why. Because I've told you that you need to believe in yourself, and it sounds really nice, and maybe you believe me because, thank you, because that's on a t-shirt, and you need to believe in yourself, and maybe that's what your high school teacher taught you, and you need to believe in yourselves. But why? How does one follow from the other? How is Emunas Atzmo an outgrowth of Emunah in Hashem? So let's explore how this works. So Rav Tzadok himself says, this is how it works. First, you have to believe that God has dealings with him, asek imo, he's involved with you, and that you're not a poel bato, that he's not an idle worker. Bein halayla. Ukechito sadeh shela'achar mitasam nevdu me'enam. In other words, he's saying, you're not, how would we put it? You're not, let's put it this way. The way that he's going to compare it to is like a gourd that grows overnight, or like a beast of the field. When we talk about hashgacha, divine providence, over plant and animal species, the Ramchal says very clearly that Hashem's providence over plant and animal species is klali. It's not based on the individual, it's based on the species. So in other words, God is not looking out for every individual deer. He may be orchestrating what happens to everything in this world, and that's maybe a different subject for a different time when we talk about hashgacha. But when it comes to the fate of a particular deer, that's not how God chooses to run the world. He's running the world based on, well, I know that the species of deer is important and valuable in the runnings of the ecosystem, and maybe even in as much as they directly affect human beings and indirectly. So God is not looking out for every single deer. Same thing, he's not looking out for every onion, but the species of onions, it's important that they exist. Yes?
Idea is not the same with humans, is it?
Unlike when it comes to humans, Natana. Yes, exactly. You're right.
Just making sure.
When it comes to human beings, there is an understanding that that every human being is an end unto him or herself. So, thank you for joining. So, human beings actually occupy kind of two roles. In other words, there is an element to every human being in terms of how they contribute to the entire whole of humanity. So you are looked at both as part of the whole, maybe part of the entire Jewish people, but also as an individual. And those two can vary. Often the Rishonim talk about the reason why that may vary is to the extent to which your individual efforts and who you've chosen to become has more and more of an impact on the entirety of the Jewish people in the world. So then God, in a certain sense, prioritizes you because you're more fundamental to the Jewish people. Yeah. So Rav Dessler says, for example, if you want to get a favorable judgment on Rosh Hashanah, you have two options. Either you can be a total tzaddik, which is very hard to do, or you can make yourself indispensable to the whole. If you choose to take upon yourself the responsibility of the community, of all the Jewish people, of all the world, then God says, well, what can I do? You're a very valuable player in the game. I can't take you out now. So now we're getting a little bit farther afield. What Rav Tzadok is simply saying is that the reason why we have emunah in ourselves is because the first thing that we have to understand is that we are not part of the scenery. Everything else in the world serves an instrumental value. God parades the animals in front of Adam and he names them, the Medrash says, in order to determine their function with regards to their usefulness to humanity. The way that we understand the world is that animals, plants, even minerals exist in order to serve humans. That's why it says that before Adam came into Gan Eden, God hadn't even placed rain in the garden because there was no purpose of having anything before Adam came. Everything's there for him. Now we'll see why that is in a minute. That's not as patriarchal and egocentric as it might sound like. But Rav Tzadok continues and he says, rather, Rak tzarich lahamin ki nafsho mimakor hachayim yizbrach shemo. Why is it that you're so important? Why do you have to believe in yourself? Very simple. Your neshama comes from Hashem. V'Hashem yizbrach misanegu mishtashea ba k'she'osas ritzono. And Hashem derives pleasure and delight in the neshama when it does his ratzon. So if we take the words of Rav Tzadok extremely simply, what Rav Tzadok is saying is that the calculation is like this. I have emunah in Hashem. I recognize Hashem as the creator of all. He's the source of all. He is the purpose of all of existence. Kol bara lichvodo, we say at a chuppah, or we say it in parts of davening. I've created everything from my kavod. In other words, Hashem is the reason for his own existence, and he's the purpose for our existence. Hashem is everything. That's part of our emunah, is to connect to that source of life. But after we've done that, remember, he says at the beginning, just like you have to have emunah in Hashem afterwards, then you have to have emunah in yourself. Once you can connect to that source, then you realize, oh, hold on a second. I am a fundamental part of that source. I'm completely davik to Hashem, and now I recognize that the things that I do matter. They're important. For the same reason that Hashem is important. this is a hard thing to kind of wrap our heads around. But when people ask, like, for example, you've heard of this idea that that one of the reasons why free will exists is because we need to earn our own merit. That's part of the purpose of the world. You've heard this idea before? It's right at the beginning of Derech Hashem. The Ramchal says that you might ask yourself, why doesn't God create a perfect world where everything is amazing, everyone is happy, you have all of your needs met, and we can just play like children all day? And he says part of the reason why that is because that would not be the greatest good. The greatest good is for you to earn your own merit. Now, why would that be? The response to that would be, well, why doesn't God just create a world where that's not the greatest good? Let the greatest good be us just playing all day and having all of our needs met. Why is it that the greatest good is that we get to earn our own reward? So why is that? Any thoughts? You've heard this all before. You've heard this before, this idea that God created the world in such a way that we need to earn our own perfection. We need to work for our own reward. If we didn't work for it, then it wouldn't be as good. Why not? You can kind of understand this on an intuitive level, yes? Intuitively, why is it not as good?
Because we want to earn something from and not charity.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good to take handouts, right? The kabbalistic farm call it nehama de kisufa, the bread of shame. It doesn't actually taste as good. My daughter knows this from babysitting money. Ooh, it feels good to buy your own iced coffee than to have your parents buy it for you, even though they still ask me to buy it for them. It feels better, but the question is why? Why does it feel better? Why do we get more enjoyment out of that which we have earned than that which we have been given?
Maybe because we're taking advantage of the privileges that we've been given, like in comparison to animals and plants. If we have autonomy, we have a consciousness, we have like morality, and when we are able to like maximize our potential as humans, like that's a really good feeling if you're not being an idle worker.
Yes, so we do get to maximize our potential, but the animals seem pretty happy. I don't know. Maybe they're just living in ignorant bliss. Maybe we should just be like animals who they're not earning their reward.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I was going to say they kind of are.
Okay, so you're saying like some of them hunt and some of them prey, but okay, like look,
And if they're not, it's because we chose.
There's an interesting Mishnah that says that like I've never seen an animal who's a chenvani, who's a storekeeper. Like animals, they don't work as hard for their parnasa as we do.
Well, we don't know that. I would really disagree with that. I would think it's way harder to go out and kill prey to eat than it is to go to the store.
Not if that's your nature. If your nature is to go kill.
If my nature is to go to the store.
Well, but your nature is also to go to the store, but you need that money to be able to go to the store.
My point is that you're totally right that we've been given the opportunity to earn our potential, but why? Why is that better? Why is that better than just living in a happy world? The fact that we have to earn our potential, by the way, is the source of a lot of sadness in the world. Because there's disappointment. There's people who don't fulfill their potential. There are people who try very desperately to live where they are receiving all day. Trust fund babies who never have to work a day in their life, and they're wondering why their life is so meaningless and unfulfilling. Okay, but why? Why is it so hard? Why make life so hard? So the Ramchal explains like this. He says that the reason why it's better to earn what you get is because we have to define good. What's the greatest good in the universe? If you want to, I've told you it's better, it's good to earn what you get instead of getting it for free. But what's good? How do we define good? What's the greatest good in the universe? God, Hashem. The greatest good is being God. By definition, he's perfect. He's everything. Now, there's only one problem. You can't be God for a few reasons. Number one, because there's only one God. And number two, because we are fundamentally different from God in a very crucial respect, which is that we are created. We're finite. It's another word of saying we're finite. We are created. We are not the cause of our own existence. God exists of his own right. There's no cause to God. He exists because that's who he is. That's his definition. We could just as easily not exist. So therefore, our existence is dependent upon something outside of us, which means in a very real way, we're already behind the game because we never earned our right to exist. We never earned birth. That is totally a handout to be alive. So that's a bit of a letdown, isn't it? Because we want to be like God, but in a very, very fundamental way, we can't be like God. From the moment we're born, we're not like God. So what do? How do you solve the problem? Be yourself? What does that mean?
Be who Hashem wanted you to be.
Yes, but it's still not being, that you can be yourself and still be godly, right? Because there's a part of you that's godly, but how do you reveal that godliness? If you're not like God in a very important way, so how do you overcome that hump? Yeah? Try to do things he does. Sure. You have to emulate God? Absolutely. But I'm telling you that you can't emulate God in a very, very, very important way. You can't be the cause of your own existence. By the way, you want to know something really cool? You've ever heard of Freud? You've heard of his Oedipal complex? You know what the Oedipal complex is? This is one of his most famous discoveries, is that all boys, this is his theory, all boys secretly harbor, I see your hand, so I'll get to you in a second. All boys secretly harbor a desire to kill their father and marry their mother. Oh. It's based on, he names it after Oedipus, the Greek play where this king realizes that when he unknowingly killed his father and married his mother, right? And he can't live with that. But Freud identifies this as this deep yearning in every young man. Now, like, you think about that and you're like, exactly your reaction. What on earth is he talking about? Is he just making this stuff up? So a later psychologist by the name of Ernst Becker, he explained what Freud was getting at. He said, do you know what that really means, that you want to kill your father and marry your mother? You want to be your own father. You want to be the cause of your own existence. That's what Freud was saying. Every human being secretly harbors resentment for the fact that they aren't the cause of there's something very mortal about that, very binding, very, I don't know, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's a real limitation, a real lack, that the fact that you're almost like this helpless being that was pushed into the world, as opposed to being your own source of strength, your own source of creation. You want to take matters into your own hands. So we all have this real desire. It's called the bread of shame. We have this shame that, like, I don't really deserve to be here. So how do you overcome that? What do you say, Dahlia?
Well, it was like a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you ask the question. And I have two. First of all, does our neshamas exist before you're conceived?
Okay, so let me pause on that. Let's. I just want to close the loop, and then I'll answer these questions. Okay?
Well, I can't answer the question.
You mean you need to know this in order to answer the question? Yeah. Okay, fine. So do neshamas exist before you are created? There are sources that suggest that your neshama exists before you are born.
So maybe we did ask to be born. maybe we spoke to Hashem, maybe Hashem had a connection with us before we were conceived.
Yes, there is some idea that you at least have to consent to be born, right, by God. But that's still not the same thing as creating yourself.
Oh, of course not. That's still not what I meant. I meant like, because you said we didn't ask to be born. I'm like,
Oh, yeah. Okay, fine. Did I ever tell you about this Indian guy, this guy in India who sued his parents for giving birth to him?
Did he win?
No. His parents are lawyers. His parents are both lawyers. But he said, this is a life of suffering and I didn't consent to be born. And so I'm suing you for bringing me into this world. I think part of it was part of a publicity stunt because he wanted to be popular as an influencer or something. But you get the idea. Yeah. Oh, you had one more question. Sorry. Let's go ahead, Dahlia, and then we'll get to Leo.
Like, you were saying that, like, well, obviously it's not you, but you were quoting somebody who said that, like, Freud, what he meant by that was that you want to be your own creator. So, like, you're inherently jealous of your father, but I would argue that your father is not your creator. It's your mother. She only gave you life. If she, you know what I mean?
Right, but if you, yes, okay. Should we get into that? I don't want to dissect too much the theories of Freud, right?
He wants to kill his mother and marry his father.
No, but I'm saying that's somebody else's interpretation of what Freud said, so I'm trying to invalidate the person's interpretation of what Freud said.
Yeah.
Not what Freud said. I mean, I think he's a freak, but that's a separate conversation.
No. It's really important. By the way, this is really important. Many people have had a lot of disagreements with Freud over the years. But you cannot argue with him until you take him seriously. He was the father of all of modern psychology. He created the field, and he brought into existence so many of the concepts that modern psychologists use as the bread and butter of psychological theory. He was an absolute genius. He was not a very particularly moral human being, but he was an insane genius who had brilliant ideas. And only because he brought these ideas into the world could later people say, actually, I disagree with what you were saying. I argue with that. But you have to, before you can argue with Freud, you have to take him seriously. So I think this is what a lot of people have tried to do over the years, is to say there's a depth to what he was saying. We have to try to figure that out. So anyway, be that as it may, we've gotten to we've spent quite a lot of time discussing this very question, which is, why is it that it's better to earn your reward than to get it for free? So the Ramchal says, you want to try to take a stab at it?
No, we feel like we have control.
Explain.
Like creating something, we can't create that we're born, but we can create in our heads, or how we perceive the world. We can create a certain thing.
You're so tantalizingly close. The way that the Ramchal describes it is, the second best thing to creating ourselves is to earn our reward, is to earn what we get. You're right, I couldn't create myself. I never earned being born, but once I'm in this world, I can earn my food, I can earn my clothing, I can earn my house.
You said the second best thing.
In other words, if I want to be like God, I can't be like God in the sense that he is the cause of his own existence. But I can come very close. That after I'm born, I can be responsible for my own existence. I can bring into the world all of the things that I enjoy and all the things that I benefit from through my own effort. And in that way, it's almost as if I am creating myself. And in so doing, I'm emulating God. I'm coming closer to godliness. Because God doesn't take no handouts. He's not a taker. He's independently self-sufficient. And that's what I'm doing too. And that's why it feels better to earn what you get than to get it for free. So the whole project of being a human is trying to emulate God. It's the greatest pleasure that you'll ever experience because you're connecting with your source. And guess what helps you get in touch with that? Emunah. Working on Emunah, this concept of dvekus, of experientially becoming one with your creator, helps you to understand your creator. Helps you to realize that you are coming from the Makor HaChaim. And so Rav Tzadok says that once you've achieved that level of connection, you have no choice but to see yourself as to quote the Tanya, a ray of light coming from the sun, right? You're an aspect of divinity. So if you have to have Emunah in the divine, you have to have Emunah in every consequence of the divine, everything that comes out of it, every extension of it, including yourself. You matter. You matter. Now, the Rabbeinu Yonah, who was a Rishon, some of you have probably heard of his sefer Sharei Tshuva, the Gates of Tshuva, popular sefer that's read in Elul. It's not an easy read, but it's a beautiful, beautiful sefer. But he wrote quite a bit of commentary on the Gemara, and in Brachos, he comments on this very strange saying. There's a pasuk that says Gilu Barada, which basically means rejoice in trembling, which sounds kind of like a paradox. And the Gemara says, B'makom Gila Sham Teherada. In a place of rejoicing, there should be trembling, which is like, okay. So it's talking about tefillah, davening, that there should be both a sense of joyous elation, but also this deep fear, right? A real trembling before God. So Rabbeinu Yonah tries to explain how both of those can be true at the same time. And he says the simple understanding of the verse is that even though regarding humans, fear and joy are polar opposites, because when a person is afraid of another, he stands recoiled and worried. When you are afraid of a human, you can't be joyful. Joy represents an expansion of the self, an expansion of oneself. That's when we experience joy. And when you're afraid of another person, they make you feel small. So the two can't go together. However, regarding Hashem, it is not the case. On the contrary, when a person contemplates his greatness, God's greatness, and is in awe of him, he will rejoice and be delighted in that awe because it is the means by which he will be inspired to fulfill the mitzvahs. How? Yes, the person will experience great joy. Why? He will be gladdened and uplifted in the fulfillment of the mitzvahs because he knows that his reward comes from him and his actions are before him. In other words, when you have Emunah in Hashem and you have true Yiras Hashem, which means we have to talk about what Yira really means, but it means you let him in. You become small so that you can let him into your world. But that makes you big by extension. There's this misconception that if I give myself over to something higher, then I'll lose myself in the process. That's a great fear that a lot of people have, a fear of giving of your time to other people. It's like, well, then I will cease to exist. Giving yourself over to a greater cause. Yeah, but then where am I? Where's the me? Where's my individualism? But the truth is that our true worth and greatness as human beings comes when we channel something greater than ourselves. My favorite example of this is Neil Armstrong. When he gets up to the moon, he doesn't say, I did it. He says that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. I am acting as a representative of all of humanity. That's why my actions are important. Not because Neil Armstrong is a cool guy, but because I am channeling the achievements of all of humanity. You know how many people it took to get me here? So, such a cool line. When was he thinking about it on the way up to the moon, or he's been practicing it in the mirror before he? Did they really go to the moon? Yeah, let's not go there. The simplest explanation is yes, he did. Simplest explanation. Look, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories, but Again, let's not go there. Let's not go there. So what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying is, the more I make myself a channel, a conduit for the divine, I attach myself through Emunah, and I'm allowed to have real Yiras Hashem, where I make myself smaller to let something in. The small I fades to the background so that the larger I can take its place. It's still me, but now it's me as an extension of something so much greater than me. Then all of a sudden that fills me with so much joy. And this is what it means to have Emunah in oneself. Oh, I get it. I don't have to be afraid of anything else because of what I'm connected to. I know that what I do counts because of what I'm connected to. This is what Emunah affords. This is true Emunas Atzmo, true Emunah in oneself. So I just want to bring one more source, because we spoke about Yiras Hashem, but I want to talk about the other side of the coin, which is Ava, love, and specifically love for oneself. I know we get kind of obsessed with self-esteem, and it's been this, let's say for the last 50, 60 years, the world of psychology has been very into self-esteem. But historically, throughout Jewish Sfarim, self-esteem is not a very good thing. In other words, ahavas atzmo, a love for oneself, has not been spoken about very highly in Sfarim, because a love for oneself means you're only doing it for yourself. It's just egotism. It's like, I love myself so much that I'm gonna watch out for number one, and all of my actions will be based on, well, what's in it for me? But the Shari Yosher, which was a sefer written by Rav Shimon Shkop, who was one of the most unbelievable lamdanim of the 20th century, he wrote the sefer Shari Yosher as a sefer on lumdus, on like deep, very, very complex Talmudic arguments, very complex. But he wrote in his introduction a whole treatise on the concept of kedusha. What does it mean to be kadosh? And his theory is that kadosh means that I do nothing for myself. That when Hashem says, I am kadosh, what Hashem really means is I don't need anything. There's nothing in it for me to create the world. It's totally for others. It's totally for the benefit of others. That's what kadosh means. But Rav Shimon Shkop says we have to grapple with the fact that he commands us to be kadosh as well. Kadoshim tiyu, you should be kadosh, ki kadosh ani Hashem, because I am kadosh as well. However, Rav Shkop says, again, there's a fundamental divide between who we are and who God is. I can't be the same level of kadosh as Hashem, because God is perfect, so that's why he doesn't need anything. When he gives, he can be an absolute giver. He needs nothing. But we human beings need things. It's a real tension. It's a real tension that has to be addressed properly. Is like, I want to be altruistic. I want to be a giver, but you can't ignore yourself. So Rav Shimon Shkop says you don't have to. So listen to what he says. We should not strive to emulate the kedusha, the holiness of the Creator in this respect of kedusha. For the Creator's holiness is above our holiness. His holiness is only for his creatures and not for himself. Since nothing was added, nor will anything be added to the Creator through his deeds that he did and does. He gets nothing out of it because by definition he's perfect. If you're perfect, you need nothing. Nothing can be gained by anything you do. So even when we say we make God happy or this or that, like, these are all human anthropomorphizing of God so that we can kind of understand his actions. But from his point of view, he gets nothing out of it. It's a hard concept to understand. But yeah, logically you get it. Someone who's perfect needs nothing, and nothing can be added or gained for him. However, but what he desires from us is not in this manner. He doesn't want us to need nothing and want nothing. For Rebbe Akiva taught us, your own life takes precedence. You know the story of two people who are going through the desert and only one of them has a flask of water. You've heard this example in the Talmud. What do? If you've got the flask, Rebbe Akiva says you drink it because your life takes precedence. What is that? I thought you're supposed to be a giver. I thought you're supposed to love your neighbor like yourself. So he says, they also hinted that we should interpret the verse, love your neighbor as yourself, in the negative sense. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. But in the positive sense, it's fitting for a person to prioritize his own benefit. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says this explicitly. He says the two are a contradiction. How can your own life take precedence, and yet you should love your fellow like you? You can't love them like you, because then you'd share the water. So obviously, it must be that your life does take precedence. You have to have a certain love for yourself. Furthermore, there's reason to say that at the foundation of human creation, the Creator implanted within him a desire for self-love. God gave you a self-love. For the sages of truth said regarding the purpose of all divine service, he wanted to bestow complete goodness, such that there would not even be shame for the recipients, the bread of shame, exactly what we've been speaking about. It's built in that I want to take care of myself. I want to fulfill my needs. And this matter is astounding to what extent the power of self-love reaches. That again, to quote the Gemara, a person loves one measure of his own, in other words, what he created for himself, what he made himself, over 9 measures of what someone else gives him. And this, by the way, has been proven by psychology. That the thing that you made, they call it the IKEA effect. What you made yourself with your own hands, you value much more highly than what other people made, even if it's the same or even better. Pretty cool. From this, we understand that the trait of self-love is desirable in Hashem's eyes. Now, just skip the next paragraph and then go to, now at first glance, the feelings of self-love and the feelings of love for others, they're like rivals, but we have to strive to delve deeply into this and find the quality that unites them, since God requires both of them. I have to love myself, I have to love other people, I have to love Hashem. All of those have to be true. How can all of those be true? This quality is that a person should clarify and verify for himself the nature of his I. Which I are we talking about? Which self are we talking about when we talk about self-love? Let's listen to this, so beautiful. The coarse and lowly person, his entire I, is confined only to his physical matter and body. Higher than that is the person who feels that his I is composed of body and soul. I'm not just a body, I'm a body and a soul. Above that is someone whose I includes his household and his family. I expand my definition of self. By the way, I hold that that's the Jewish definition of love. So that those that I love are now part of I. So self-love includes them as well. And then the person who walks according to the ways of the Torah, his I includes all the Jewish people. For in truth, every Jewish person is but a limb of the body of the Israelite nations. And there are yet higher levels. The perfected person should root in his soul the feeling that all the worlds in their entirety are his I. The entire universe is part of you. So when we talk about self-love, it's just emanating outwards to include everything. And he himself is but a small limb within all of creation. Then even the feeling of self-love helps him to love all of the Jewish people and all of creation and, of course, Hashem himself. Because that's where it comes from. That's the real I. So real Emunah, done properly, and you've really integrated it, you're exuding self-love. Because the dvekus that you achieve helps you to recognize that the little old me, the little I, is actually part of a much greater I. And really, altruism is really just self-interest. It's enlightened selfishness, the Jewish definition of love. I'm doing it because I love myself. You're just part of me. How cool is that? And in that sense, there is no such thing as as nullifying the self, or you let people walk all over you. No, it's because of how much love there is. The more you've built your I, the more you recognize that little I is actually connected to big I, then everything's part of that I. So that's what I wanted to end with, is that at the end of the day, to have real Emunah should mirror back on how we see ourselves. Wow, that was long. So, how do I sum this all up? Yeah, I do hope that that if nothing else, that you've deepened your understanding of what Emunah means. That whereas we first saw faith at the very beginning, the first class, as something like irrational, something against the mind, something that is anti-human, as the atheist that we first quoted said, whose name is escaping me right now.
Charles something.
No, that's different. That's a different one. But the exact opposite is true. Is that Emunah is where we actually find our humanity.
Christopher Hitchens.
Christopher Hitchens, thank you. You were close. Charles Christopher.
Charles, yeah, all the same.
Christopher Hitchens, who said that it goes against the very thing that makes us human. It couldn't be more wrong. Is that our real humanity is found in Emunah, because that's where I truly find who I am. The more I have that Emunah, the more I recognize what makes me truly great. So, be great.